When Rent opened on Broadway more than a decade ago, it took the theatrical world by storm, won multiple Tony Awards, and has been performed around the world. Hello, for the American Theater Wing, I'm Julie James, host of Broadway Names with Julie James on Sirius XM Radio. And today, we're going to take an in-depth look at musical theater. Rent was a game changer for that genre, and at its heart was composer Jonathan Larson. Following his untimely death, his family established the Jonathan Larson Grants, and the American Theater Wing has administered them for the last several years. Given annually, the grants recognize the work of emerging composers, lyricists, and book writers who match Jonathan's dream of infusing musical theater with a contemporary, joyful, urban vitality. This year, the songwriting team of Julianne Wick-Davis and Dan Collins were recipients of the Jonathan Larson Grant for their musical Southern Comfort.
I got music all around me. It's been singing me somewhere. And as long as it stays with me, I know I'll make it there. It's not my imagination, ain't no wind across a tree. If you tell me you don't hear it, you ain't listening properly.
Joining me in the studio to start our conversation about the challenges and triumphs of musical theater are actress Heidi Blickenstaff, currently appearing in Now, Hear This, and a veteran of The Addams Family, The Little Mermaid, and Title of Show. Choreographer Christopher Gattelli, whose newest musicals are Newsies and Godspell. His work in South Pacific earned him a Tony nomination. Recently, he directed Silence the Musical off-Broadway. And composer and lyricist Robert Lopez, a two-time Tony winner for his musicals Avenue Q and The Book of Mormon. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'd love to begin. I think we can all agree that there is nothing more magical than a live performance. But what was it that drew each of you to musicals in particular?
I was a very musical child and always kind of, my mom tells stories of me being a 2-year-old and harmonizing with her when she would sing me lullabies at night. And she would park me in front of the speaker when she would play Barbra Streisand albums. And I fell in love watching those MGM musicals, Singin' in the Rain and Hello Dolly and all of that stuff. I memorized that, and she took me to go see a dinner theater production of Oklahoma. And there was a kid in that, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, this is possible for a child to actually be on stage. And when I was old enough, I ended up auditioning for that theater, and thus began my illustrious career in theater. But I've always definitely been, I think I've been a musician first. I've always been very, very drawn to music. Music is very, just so important to me, and I would love to do other things, but I almost exclusively do musicals. But I've loved them, and when I saw my very first musical on Broadway, I knew, well, I've known forever that that's what I wanted to do, but my first musical was 42nd Street, and was just like, I was 10. I was like, oh, that's it. I want to do that. I want to do that, and I'm lucky enough to be able to do it.
Yeah. Christopher, how about you? What was it about musicals in particular?
I think, well, my first experience, funny enough, was Godspell. I was, I think, 5, and I saw it at a local high school or something, and I just, I don't, especially that show with the performers running through the audience and singing, and Stephen's music's fantastic, and it just, I don't know, it really kind of hooked me in, and then I started dancing when I was really young, and then the first experience I had in a musical was the national tour of Evita was traveling the country, and they were picking up kids in each city, and I did the national tour of Evita at 11, and I remember just like seeing that at that age. When I was 5, Godspell was a little more magical and kind of like what's going on, and it was so interesting. But at 11, to see that and witness what that can do to an audience, and just it was fantastic. And I would, after my part, I would run around to the front of the house and watch it from the back, and I knew that was the moment I knew that I couldn't do anything else.
And Bobby, you're on another side of this spectrum from the composition side. So musicals.
Yeah, I was always a musical kid. I took piano lessons and I wrote little songs for piano. And And I guess, my parents were really into musicals. They loved, West Side Story and My Fair Lady and Sound of Music and all those great movies. And I grew up in New York City, actually, so I saw a fair share of Broadway shows. I saw Chorus Line when I was 7.
Wow.
Which was pretty inappropriate. And then I saw Follies in Concert when I was like 10, which was also kind of inappropriate.
Also wildly inappropriate.
And in my high school, there was my elementary school, we had this great music teacher who kind of basically took over the school. The 5th and 6th graders didn't learn anything and just did a show. And mine was West Side Story. In 5th grade, I played a jet, even though I was like the only Spanish-speaking kid in school.
That makes sense.
So yeah, so I started writing musical, songs for my little theater group. So I was indoctrinated very early, and I like plays, but I love musicals.
What made you think from being in a performance, but that you could actually write something?
Well, I had started writing music. It never seemed like something kids couldn't do to me, because my piano teacher made me write songs every week, so I was forced to write. And then puberty hits and you kind of want to express yourself. So
Yeah.
Looking back, I never had a chance.
Do you remember some of the songs you wrote when you were a kid?
Yeah, my first song was called Oy Vey, What a Day.
I knew there were going to be gems in there.
And I wrote a song called The Red Tape of Society, which was all about,
Wow.
Class and love.
Wow, heady.
And I wrote these very Sondheim-y, wanting to be Sondheim so badly that you couldn't stand to listen to the song.
So from your childhood love of musicals to what you're doing today, what is the trajectory of musicals, the ones that you fell in love with versus where you feel like we are today, and what musicals are doing and their relevance, if you will? Where have they come, and later I want to talk about where are they going?
I feel like there are no rules, and you can keep pushing boundaries, or you can go back and kind of pay homage to just the old school thing of what we fell in love with. Roll back, even if it's roll drops and 2 lights or whatever it is. But that's kind of why I'm loving being on the side of the table so much, because there are no rules, and we can create something spectacular, or we could create something like Downtown with Silence with 4 panels and 2 chairs, or or your show with 4 chairs.
Right.
It's like
we don't even need panels.
You don't need panels.
Panels? We're going off road.
That's it. But that's why I'm loving it, and that's why I'm loving that there are a lot of young voices and people trusting our young voices and what we do, and just to keep trying different things. And there's no formula. There's no math like 2 + 2 = 4. This plus this equals success, or this. It's just kind of, you go for it, and you see what people respond to, and that to me is exciting. So.
What's interesting too is the show I'm doing now, Hear This, is kind of a mapless. There's nothing in front of us that was any kind of map for us to follow. It is a very non-traditional musical. It is very direct address storytelling, but inside that we also break that rule, and sometimes we do scenes with each other. We do songs, we do snippets of songs. We're asking the audience to go on this very sort of off-road journey with us, and it's working, which is great. So on that hand, you have, this musical that is like nothing I've ever seen. And for people that take that ride, great, and some people don't. But like your musical, Mormon, is as strange as the source is. It's such a traditional Broadway musical. Yes. So, what you've done, and I mean, it's just sort of, it's very bold, very unusual, and yet very traditional.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think to do a traditional musical these days, you sort of need to have really super unorthodox subject matter, and then I think maybe to the converse of that, if you're doing a wildly abstracted, different form of storytelling, you kind of want something to hang on to in the story you're telling. Maybe more of a simpler story. That's sort of how I've chosen my projects. Avenue Q is like the simplest story and the most traditional subject matter. It's boy meets girl, and growing up in New York, or, living in New York, and but the form of storytelling is different, and puppets and educational songs and stuff like that.
Yeah. What do you feel like we need to do to continue to make sure that there are younger Heidi, Bobby, and Chris's out there that are falling in love with musical theater the way that you did, that are being developed, if you will? Audiences are so important for any show, and developing them and making sure that we're creating musicals that young audiences are going to want to see.
Right.
Where do you think we're at with that?
I think I think there was a time that Broadway was a little bit losing its way, maybe because at least certainly when I graduated college, liking musicals was not at all cool. It was not part of the popular culture. It was sort of, it labeled you as something else. And I've always loved musicals, but I always wanted to write something that connected with a large group of my peers and all that. So I that's how I've always tried to write shows that I'd want to see and that my friends from college would want to see.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of how an art form stays relevant, that people don't treat it like this something else you have to follow rules or whatever. Not this. You need a nun, a dog, and Abraham Lincoln.
Wait.
Then you just have nuns and dogs and Abraham Lincoln forever. But I think one of the things is comedy. I think comedy has, and all of us have been a part of that movement. That I was just thinking about it the other day that avant-garde comedy kind of started in the '60s, maybe. Like, it's an English-speaking thing that comedy hasn't really developed as far in the non-English-speaking world. Would you say that's possibly true? It may just be ignorance on my part, but I kind of feel like there's no equivalent to Monty Python and Matt Stone and Trey Parker in Asia. Anyway, so and musical theater is the same way. I don't think that there's the same. Musical theater doesn't really exist in other languages to the same degree that it does in English. And it's funny that musical theater kind of right when rock and roll started was the same time that the great comedy stuff started really evolving, like Monty Python, and it's the same time that musical theater started to be maybe a little bit less, mainstream. Popular songs stopped coming out of it and all that stuff. Anyway, so isn't that weird? So that during that time that comedy kind of grew and evolved, musical theater kind of stayed flat and didn't really incorporate that. And I feel like when our generation has come to musical theater, we've chosen to mix it up. You couldn't see what musical theater and comedy had to do with each other unless you looked at musical send-ups like The Producers and the movie of The Producers and like the musical send-ups on The Simpsons and in South Park and Best in Show and that that stuff has been hugely influential to me, and I feel like bringing that stuff into a show that still has an emotional journey and doesn't sacrifice all of the wonderful things about musicals has been kind of a lot of what I've been doing, and I think a lot about what we've been doing in the last 10 years.
Chris, you have musicals like Newsies and Godspell that seem to be kind of trying to mobilize a younger audience and appeal to a younger audience.
Yeah, Godspell, definitely we tried to take kind of polish it up a bit, and Stephen was part of the process, and we changed some stuff, mixed some stuff up, and tried to make it, you don't want to say accessible, but we did change a few things to make it a little more contemporary, have a little more connection with the audience in that, and Newsies too. Part of what I hope we succeeded doing, but is taking this 1899 true story, but kind of tell it in a contemporary way, that whether it be set, whether direction, whether it be Alan's music, whether it be my movement, it's one of my favorite things about the show is you're watching these boys go on this journey. They're trying to make a place in the world. They're trying to make a difference and make a place in the world, and at the same time you're watching these young gentlemen on stage doing the exact same thing in real time. You have this ensemble and the cast, you're seeing them live go, this is me, this is my talent, this is how we're trying to push it forward. the way they're dancing, some of the, I hate to use the word tricks, but but some of the specialty things they can do, that's them trying to push it all forward.
Right.
So you're watching the story of these kids trying to make a difference while you're watching these boys do it right in front of your eyes, and it's this incredible combination that I don't know, it moves me every time I watch them do it.
Heidi, what's your perspective as one who has gotten to do maybe something pretty unlikely on Broadway, like title of show? I mean, we've never had a show like that on Broadway, and you must have a lot to think about and reflect on from that experience.
Yeah, that was pretty miraculous that we made it as far as we made it, to be able to stand in a place with the biggest megaphone. It was extraordinary, and that time for us is very, I remember it very specifically because we were very grateful every day that we were there, because we knew we were misfit toys. We knew it was every day that we were there was one more day of a miracle. So, we were very grateful for that experience. Title of show was definitely a game changer for all of us. It was the weirdest, you were talking earlier about what do younger artists do when they want to do this? How do they do this, and how do we support them? Well, we did Title of Show, and it was a part of the New York Musical Theater Festival, and that's a great place for young artists to submit their material if they're lucky enough to be accepted into the festival. And they accept so many. I'm not sure how many now they accept a year, but it's like 30 shows. It's a lot of shows. Wow. And we were lucky enough to be, and our show was so weird. It was weirder than it was on Broadway back then in the festival. It was so peculiar. And I mean, it had the same heart, the same soul, but it was definitely a little more just abstract. And
well, because the dream, when the off-Broadway version and the workshop and the Nymph version, the dream was like, I wonder if this show could go to Broadway.
Yeah, and I mean,
and then in the Broadway version, it was like, can this show go to Broadway? Yeah,
I know.
Here we are.
I wonder if the show can go to the moon. Yeah, we're going to get on the moon
Just
next.
in helmets.
I know.
Helmets, just.
That show was the weirdest thing because we called it the Golden Pony. Whatever we asked the Golden Pony would poop out a dream, and we would be like oh my God. Exactly. I mean, we couldn't believe that, and everybody said to us, like when we were at the festival, they said, "Oh, it's such a weird little show. It'll never make it off Broadway." And then we made it off Broadway, and then they said it'll never be a commercial run, and we had a commercial run off Broadway, and then they said it'll never be a Broadway show, and there it was on Broadway. So that was definitely the little show that could. But it wasn't a magical thing that happened. It was in that we made it so far, but we worked really hard on that show.
Yeah.
And we put in hours and hours, and I would say even years, without getting paid, and just carrying that show on our backs. And really, we were the ones that said, we've got this thing, and we invited the right people. And you have to have chutzpah, you have to believe in it. I mean, sometimes you're doing something and you're like, I am so glad to be working, but this isn't necessarily, the thing that is the highlight of my career, That happens all the time because you want to stay working and you want to stay involved. But Title of Show was not that. Title of Show was really weird and really special. And I knew it from the second Jeff Bowen sent me a couple raggedy pages and said, do you want to sing this for us? And I was like, I don't know what this is, but the answer is yes.
I think it was special for everyone in the industry. Yeah. I mean, watching it at the Vineyard, we had just done Avenue Q at the Vineyard, and going to see that show there was like deja vu, because you were telling this very universal story to anyone that creates anything, and specifically musicals, which is it's so collaborative, and there's so many, there's a lot of budding of personalities and tests of the bonds between creators, and all that stuff rang a bell for me when I was watching it. I was wondering how it would feel to an even younger person that saw it before they had their shot, and if they would get deja vu when they were having their shot. Oh, I saw this in Title of Show. Change it, don't change it.
Still, doing Now Hear This, it's funny, when we were doing Title of Show at the Vineyard, our audiences weren't always full. And now, doing Now Hear This, our audiences are packed. And that's because of this audience that we managed to grow during Title of Show, which we're so grateful for. But last night, as I was exiting the theater, there were these young kids, like, I don't know, like young 20s, you know, going to college. And they said to me, I was in high school when I first heard A Way Back to Then. And I was like, oh my God, it's been around that long now that these kids are, I mean, in high school when they were exposed to the material. And that's now having an effect on them that's going to, you know, who knows what their trajectory is going to be. And I am very proud to be in a business that, and especially with the show in particular, with Title of Show, if it has anything to do with inspiring people to go forward and live your dream, then, I mean, you know, that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up about Nymph, because that is a way for new musicals, new voices, new works to get heard, and new performers get discovered. And Bobby, you've been part of workshops, and you were also on the selection committee, I believe, for the Jonathan Larson grants that we mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah.
What are some of the forums, you know, for these types of things, BMI, ASCAP?
For writers, yeah. I mean, for me, the BMI workshop was hugely formative. I graduated. I mentioned before that I've been like writing musicals my whole life, and I got to New York after college, and I thought, well, I can handle this. I can do it. And I thought I kind of knew everything because I had done so much, you know, experience. But I didn't know how to work with people, and I didn't really understand the idea of you know, why to write and how to connect with people. I didn't really get any of that. So I was trying to become Alan Menken's assistant as soon as I graduated. I knew a friend who knew his sister, so I got in touch with her, and she was like, you know, Alan's not looking for an assistant, but you know what he would tell you to do if you were talking to him? He'd say, join the workshop. So I joined the workshop, and through that I met so many people. You know, Tom Kitt and Brian Yorkie were in my class.
This is BMI?
The BMI Layman Angle workshop. And you know, there were teachers there who knew so much about, you know, they give you the lingo, you kind of the jargon we use in the theater. You learn how to talk about musicals in a way that people understand what you're saying, and you have the experience every week of bringing in a song and seeing whether it lands. And I would bring in my songs, you know, the first year, and they wouldn't land. So it was a huge eye opener, just in terms of that, just in terms of trying your songs for real for an audience, and meeting people your same age who want to do it, and learning and figuring out, like, who am I in this business? What do I want to give to people instead of how do I want to show off for them? It's all about, you know, what do you have to say that is of any value to the world, and what kind of person are you, and what's your worldview? That's kind of what writing is all about. It's not about, I'm good at this, I want to show off and I want to get attention. You know, it's not about that.
Yeah. And of course, we have 2 shows on Broadway this season that came from the New York Theater Workshop, Once and Peter and the Starcatcher. So participating in, you both surely must have participated in tons of those kinds of workshops and new works development programs.
Yeah,
Altar Boys.
Altar Boys.
Too. I was on the panel this year to choose, and it was great to see. I didn't realize, you know, I didn't realize that part of the process, and it was great to be able to see these scripts and scores coming through and reading them, and just, I don't know, it got me excited that there are that many people out there that are still trying to, again, and some of them were really offbeat, but just put, you know, again, there are no rules, and they're just pushing envelopes and trying new things and trying new formats and it's great. You know, it's great because someone's going to take that one and go, and then they're going to go and they're going to expose us to something we haven't seen, and that's always exciting to me, whether it's accepted or not, or however it's received. But that's the most exciting part to me.
And it also gives young writers and young actors too, even if it doesn't go forward, even if it's not picked up, it gives you the experience of actually, you know, for writers especially, getting your stuff up for the first time and really learning how to collaborate, learning how to get a show actually up in this town.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's hard. It's really, really hard, and you have to cut your teeth. You have to learn how to do it. When we were doing title of show, it was a gorgeous mess. It was a mess, and the venue we got was like, we joked that it was like a cockfighting ring. It was the weirdest venue. It was at the you know where the Zipper Theater right next to it. It used to be. It's now a restaurant, but I'm convinced it used to be a cockfighting ring. It used to be, or it's
It wasn't
called the
even
Belt.
in the Zipper, it was next to the
Yeah, it was called the Belt. It's not the Zipper. It's the Belt.
Oh, right.
And
Just above the Zipper.
Yeah, and where the theater was, it was kind of on this platform where the audience was below you and above you, and so we had to figure. I mean, the
I was above.
Wild.
I watched. I watched.
Right, right. But I mean, there was so much that we had to change from that. But it was such a great learning experience. And what that did for us was it got us a commercial producer involved. But even if something magical doesn't happen to you, I think as an artist, whether you're a writer or a performer, you get to do something in New York from start to finish.
Yeah.
And even if all you get is a Metro card for your time and work, you got to do something in New York, and it's something you can invite your agent to, or if you're shopping for an agent, you can invite prospective agents to come and see it. And that's an important thing, because getting seen in New York is not easy.
Yeah.
It's totally not easy. But that festival and festivals like it offer that to young writers and artists.
You know, I bet it's funny. Like, there's a saying that your first show it becomes your calling card. It never gets produced, but it becomes sort of like, here, I wrote this, and you can meet me, and I'm fun to work with. But your show, by the end of your show, you feel like, I want to work with those people. I want to know them. I want to be in business with them. I feel like you kind of killed two birds with one stone. With
that was what was so great about our show. We're talking a lot about title of show, but it was the greatest audition in the world.
Right on message.
And the same thing with Now Hear This, because we use ourselves as the source of all the raw material.
Right.
So whether it's for better and for worse, we are up there being a version of ourselves. I mean, there's certainly some type, we call it autobifictionography, because all of it's true except for the big honkin' lies, and there are lies.
Like Mike Daisy. The other thing that I did that I don't know, did you do Theater Works ever? No, that was my
another big
intro,
one.
because I didn't have a show. I didn't really have a break or anything like that, but getting experience was so important. And Theater Works, even though I don't know why I did it to get experience, really, and then that experience serves you, because Jeff Marks and I were writing in the BMI workshop. You put one song up at a time, and they seem to work. We felt like we were really good at it, and we told Barbara Pasternak, who was the head of Theater Works, we said, we're good because we can kind of nail it the first time. We get a song. We don't have to do many rewrites because we work at it so hard that it's right. And she was like, huh? And then our show, that Ferdinand the Bull, our first show, I think we must have written 30 songs for a 6-song show.
Oh my gosh. That's great though.
Yeah. No, it's, you have to learn that there's a difference between a good song and the right song.
Yeah. Bobby, you mentioned being very uncool for liking theater.
Did I mention that?
Well, not now. Now you're the coolest kid in town. But at a certain point, liking musical theater did not make you cool. I think title of show had a cool factor. And I'm curious just what you each think about the fact that we're now in a point where we're seeing musical theater on primetime television.
Right.
And whether that has a cool factor. Is musical theater cool again?
I think so. I mean, the kids, the younger kids I know that are coming up are really interested in Glee, and I think that's awesome. I think people actually in the industry have very strong feelings about shows like Glee and Smash.
Yes.
But say what you will, those shows have definitely made an impact on this industry, for better and for worse. They have put us back in the spotlight, and I don't know if it's made us cool, but it certainly has shined a light on us in a brand new way. And I do think it's good for our industry. I think it's made, people all over America that may not have been exposed to musical theater stuff suddenly have an interest, and that's good, you know. And a lot of the ground that they're covering, you know, I think is really important, especially with, you know, I think about Ryan Murphy and all the good stuff he's done for the gay community, and I think that's really important for that to get injected into America at large.
Yeah.
So it's good. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I also think there are a lot more there are more opportunities. I think like what you were saying earlier about, you know, Broadway was kind of not finding its way, and then I feel like there's the diversity of what's out there right now. Like you can play an instrument and be in a show, and you can, you know, be a puppeteer. You could do. There are so many more skill sets that you're open to now to be in a show. You can have a rock voice, you can have a pop voice, you can have musical theater voice, you can, you know, sing opera. You can. It's just, it feels like there are more diverse opportunities to be a part of what Broadway is, and not like, oh, I have my standard this song to sing, or it just feels a little more, the game's a little more open.
It's such an irony, because I think getting into this business was like the riskiest thing that I could possibly say to my parents, you know. So they're like, oh, you want to do that? Okay. Somehow you'll make money, I guess, maybe one day. But it's funny that the way that history has kind of turned out, the internet has fractured all the other forms of entertainment, and to the point where now I think, you know, there kind of is no clear definition of what is the music industry, what is the film industry, what is TV anymore. It's really hard to, it's all becoming this one computer media thing, and it's all omnipresent. And I think theater is more special than that. Theater has remained the same. It's always going to be magical because you are there, and that's sort of the message of live theater. It puts you in the now, and it gets you in a community with other people, and you know what media does is kind of isolates us in our point of view, and what theater does is it can actually open you up and challenge your point of view, and maybe change your point of view. You always go to a musical for hopefully a transformative experience, something that you will never forget, and something that touches you deeply, and hopefully changes your outlook in some small way.
And it's also a shared experience too, that you're sitting next to people that are there that same night that Patti LuPone yelled at the guy with the cell phone. Like you are sharing something that is truly singular, that is only for you in those 100 minutes or however long that show is. And that is very unusual in this age where we are so distracted with, you know, all the devices in our hands, and you know, just every single thing that calls us away from being present in our own lives. And theater makes you hold still for a second, and you get to share that moment with, you know, however many people are in the theater with you that night.
Absolutely. And the feeling that this moment will never come again.
Yeah.
You know, these lines will be said, these songs will be sung, these steps will be danced, but this particular moment will never come again.
It is
that
true.
Is just magical.
That's also the extremely most frustrating thing about musicals, because you have, you know, when you're developing them, you see if you're lucky enough, you see your vision one night, and then and then if you're really lucky, you're in
notes.
you're in a, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a many-year running show, then it's a many-year running, like, well, it wasn't as good as last night, wasn't it good, or the night before that. It's you're constantly comparing.
There's the bar, right.
Whereas, I mean, imagine if you had a DVD, your favorite DVD, that when you played it, every time it got a little bit broader or a little bit worse, the orchestra shrank.
Changed locations, changed venues.
The actors got a little bit worse.
That's my nightmare.
Yeah. Well, there's where musicals have been, and we're kind of talking about where they are now. I mean, I have seen things on stage, mostly from your shows, that I don't know that I ever thought I would see in a musical. Where do we think that's headed with edginess and needing it to be relevant to our new world full of devices? And is there anything on Broadway that we won't see?
No, I hope not.
Yep.
I hope
Say the same
not.
thing.
As long as it's good storytelling, I say anything goes. And that's a good show too, by the way. But sincerely, I, as long as some nerd who is coming up, who is talented, can tell a good story, and it's about coal mining on the moon, I'm like, yes, as long as it's good storytelling, I hope it goes crazy. I hope we see things that we can't even imagine in this conversation. You know, I hope it's limitless.
One of the nice things about Broadway is that it doesn't have a censorship apparatus, and it's also been heavily self-censored for all of its history. So it is very, like the envelope is very small.
Yeah.
It's ready for pushing.
Yeah. Chris, what were you going to say about the censorship factor or the boundaries factor, or is there anything that we can't do in a musical?
I don't think there's anything we can. I mean that, and again, that's what and we can, and also I like that things can be appropriate for where they are. Like with Silence, it's downtown, and it's there's a lot of strong language and
Right.
such, but it's something that I feel it's right sized for where it is, because people we got pretty good response, and people were like, oh, do you want to move it? Because everything has to move, everything has to move. And I was like, but no, actually, I love where it is. I love that it's a downtown show. I love that, it's this tight, packed houses, and that's where it needs to be, and I think, and that's great too. I feel like not everything has to be on Broadway. It could be in a site-specific place. It could be in a like what they've done with 54 and what they did,
Yeah.
when they did Cabaret there, or when they've taken other theaters and done a little more site-specific, opportunities with shows. I think that's great, and it's pushing things around, or Godspell, like putting it in the round.
Right.
I love
it in the round.
It's just, I mean, and just the idea that it's communal, like you're watching them, but you're looking across, literally watching Community, what the whole show is about, and
Right.
there's something really special about that, and what that immediately does to the show, and so so no.
Or
bad.
Lysistrata Jones, and when they did it in the gym,
Right, exactly,
know.
site-specific, and absolutely.
which was really effective, I thought, for that show. So I want to know what's next. Where do we think the next vision of musicals is going? What is there still that we need to explore? What do we want to hear and see?
One thing that has been important to me as an artist continuing to evolve is now with my collaborators, I, along with them, we are starting to make our own work. I mean, title of show was our own, and now Hear This is our own, but a lot of times, this doesn't necessarily apply to you guys, but as a performer, you are an actor for hire, and you just hope that something is available to you that is a good fit, and you can read a script and say, I think I can really do that, but you kind of have to wait for those opportunities, and as being a part of this collaboration with Susan Blackwell, Hunter Bell, Jeff Bowen, Michael Buress, Larry Pressgrove, we have decided not to wait for somebody else to tell us what to do, and we are making our own work. And Jessica Molaski came to see the show. She's a wonderful actress. If you don't know who she is, she's fantastic. She came to see the show the other night, and she said, I'm so glad you did not wait for someone to tell you what to do, that you just are making your own work.
Yes.
And I certainly, for writers, obviously they're going to make what they want to make, but as an
But
actress,
actually, that's analogous to the idea of doing an adaptation versus doing an original story.
that's right.
I think there's been a bit of I think traditionally the musical theater is an adaptive art form. Oklahoma, all the Rodgers and Hammerstein, none of those shows were original stories except Allegro. I don't know. And now I feel like there's more original musicals, like just listening to the title show category of original musicals versus
Right.
adaptations of movies or books or plays or whatever. It's not any easier to write an adaptation than it is to write an original story. But I kind of feel like that's original stories is it's more of a, you know, you can clear that brush and find your own patch of land to farm.
I think that's a great answer to this question, that we have seen such a, in the recent past, there has been such a trend for revivals and material that already exists to be turned into musicals. And I think, especially with Mormon and shows, thank you, that it is, I mean, thank God for an original musical that works, that is also showing the rest of us it can work. It can work on the grandest scale. You know,
that's something, another soapbox I happen to have with me. The idea that
stand on it.
There's this area of original musicals that are actually kind of unproducible right now you know, it's the exception to the rule that you can have a risky, original, big musical. You can't have those three things. Even Mormon isn't that big. You know, we have 9 players in the pit. We have a cast of, I forget how many, but it's actually it's probably the limit of how big you can do. You can produce, you know, an original, slightly risky story. I would love to see, you know, something that's got a big chorus, that's got sets, that's got spectacle. You used to be able to see that, you know, in the 80s. You know, Andrew Lloyd Webber was able to command that kind of investment from you know, and those were amazing. And I just feel like we haven't seen a grand, crazy, big hit original in a long time. And I would love to write something like that. I feel like, you know, investors need to get a little bit. I mean, you know, if it was my money, I'm not writing that check. I would never do that. But I think there's so much to see in that pocket of unborn entertainment that we wanted, because we've seen the little show that could. There's been a lot of those. Now we need to.
But it's hard, right? I think it's so terrifying because there's so much to lose. Yeah. It's such a risky business.
And I'm seeing the trend, like with those scripts that I would see that would come across for the Nymph and all. Like, I think writers now are afraid to write something big. I think they're hesitant to go, I need a chorus of 30 because of it needs.
It'll never get produced,
right? And then I think they immediately just they check themselves and go, you know what, I shouldn't do that because no one's going to write a check for 30. So and I can kind of you can feel that in the writing where I'm like, I think that could have been fleshed out more, but they could have had a few more friends, or this could have had another family, or. But I think people are checking themselves, and they're not letting themselves really go forward with an idea without checking the oh shoot, and that's another location, so I shouldn't do that. It's set. And then, you know, and you can feel that. And I mean, I've been in those. We've all been in those conversations where it's like, how much can you shrink something down to make it, you know, producible, and that's. I understand it, but at the same time, it's frustrating because you kind of want to just do that. You want to have, you know, South Pacific with 40 people in an orchestra of 35, like, and that shouldn't be a rarity. It should.
You don't want to just go to Broadway for cool indie things. You want to see big things, and you want them to be challenging and smart and funny and of the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what a great reveal in South Pacific when the orchestra pit would be revealed and that would roll back, and you saw all those people and a harp and, you know,
38 musicians. That never, I mean,
it never happened.
Thrilling.
And you could feel the audience and their anticipation and their excitement and their gasp, and I think when I saw it, even applause, you know, because everyone is so thrilled that we're going to get a big lavish musical
again. There's that one night only experience that you get to have. That is it's such a wonderful experience to have that night at South Pacific, and then to also have that night at Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson. But I do feel like it is time for like a big original spectacle again. One that is smart and thought-provoking and weird and fantastic, but also, you know, has a camel on stage.
Hey, go to the Radio City Rockettes Christmas Spectacular. You want to see something like that, but not about Jesus. And not about Santa.
Right.
Or with Jesus and Santa, but not that same story.
Working on a revival, as well as so many original shows and revivals, you've done, you know, so many different things in your experience. What are the similarities and differences with telling a story that we maybe already know, or telling something that we're going to find out about?
Well, the great things, I mean, the two most recent, well, Godspell and then Sunny in the Park and South Pacific, it's always interesting to revisit them and go, well, why is it relevant? Because why are we doing it if it's not relevant? And to see each of those three right there, just what the concept was and the conceit was to make them happen. Each one inspired me in different ways because they are still relevant and they all had something important to say. And you know, like how the projection was used during Sunday in the Park. It was thrilling because the whole show was about art. I mean, it was, you know, staggering to me. And but what I'm loving about new works, and even though Newsies was on film, the transfer to stage to get to write fleshed out dance breaks. You know, I've never really had that opportunity. This was like my first kind of big dance show, and to be able to sit down and go, okay, what are we doing? How do we tell the story through this dance break? And to have someone sit there and go, okay, well, this is where they're going to come together. Oh, they need a challenge here. They need a, you know, and to have that happen in a show was, I mean, that's when little Chris, the 14-year-old, I'm like, you know, shaking inside because like this is going to live on. Like now that it's opened, that dance break will remain with the show forever, and I feel like I've created, like, it's now history, and it's you know, it's thrilling to be a part of something like that. And so you know, so, and then
The next step is a box around your name like Jerome Robbins.
no. I want that seat in the theater. That's what I want. I want that seat every night that I get to sit in. This is something I've asked for. No, but I love being a part of something like that because just being able to leave your mark and being able to tell the story the way you like to tell it, and with the cast you have and the creatives and the collaboration, there's nothing really like it, really.
And I do think revivals are so important. It is important for us to look back in order to move forward. And all the ones that you mentioned, I do think it's as long as someone has something to say and a point of view, as long as your director is that good captain of that ship and really has something important to say with material like the shows you mentioned, it is important for us to be able to see those shows. You know, I had never seen South Pacific. I had heard it, of course, and was very, very familiar with it, but I had never seen it until I saw the revival, and I was like, oh my God, that is an important piece of our musical theater history.
Absolutely.
And I feel better as an artist just having that experience in my arsenal, so I can move forward just knowing it. It is important to look back, definitely.
And you've been part of a big movie property style show.
Yeah, couple.
You are currently involved in a movie property show. You have references to many movie, you know, many references. What do we feel about that? Is that just a commercial decision? Is it just a paycheck decision? You know, trying to, as you said before, there's no formula at all. And so it's just trying something that maybe you think will work, or is there a place for that on our Broadway stages?
It's interesting. I mean, I'll speak for the Newsies because I feel like when Newsies came out, I saw it. I was one of those kids. I'm a fan. I'm a fansy. I was a fansy. I was one of those boys. I was a huge fan of the movie. It inspired me to dance and to make myself better. But I think to me, Newsies is a great example of the movie was flawed, or did whatever it did. But I felt like that story on stage, it just made it better. It made everything better about it, and to just, you know, have Harvey take a new look at certain things and what he did to it. But I don't think it was such like, oh, everyone's going to run out and see Newsies, because technically they was considered a flop. So it was like
there was a reason to do it. There was
a total reason to go, you know what, we can make this better. There's a story here, and there's great music, and there's opportunity for great dancing, and to me it was a perfect reason why something should make that leap. I mean, I know there are other situations where I think sometimes producers just do, like, oh, that's a great title, and I know we can wrangle them in. But I can speak for that one and say that I do, like, I'm proud to be a part of it, and I feel like it was a good decision to be able to take that to the stage and make it a musical, because I feel like that's where it deserves, it really can live on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that movies, you know, the successful movies that get adapted, sometimes get adapted because that's the kind of thing that makes people safe enough to write a check. I mean, you know, you say like, okay, I know that I can get people to come see that because it's that. And people will come see it, and then they'll like it, and they'll tell their friends, and it'll be a big hit, and we'll all get paid. But there, at the same time as that, there needs to be that reason that the writer is doing it that's not just the paycheck. There needs to be that reason that the writer is, you know, so excited to do. You know, they also say, you know, don't adapt something that's perfect. Don't adapt a masterpiece. Always have there be somewhere to go with it, that you know where it's going, that people don't know.
Right.
You know? So, and you know, when I wrote a show for a theme park called Finding Nemo the Musical. And
I enjoyed that so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
I did.
No, and it was a labor of love, and it broke that rule of like, don't adapt a masterpiece, because I think that movie is like is gold. But it was so much fun to do, and my wife and I had just become parents, and we wrote it together, and was kind of about, you know, us becoming parents to us anyway. So we were able to pour some feeling into it, and I think it lives right where it should live. And so I think, you know, adaptations can be wonderful, and you know, certainly I always try and go see them all. So so there's some reason for them.
And I think it's important to know why. I mean, too, because sometimes a movie did well because of a particular performance or a particular, you know. So I think it's knowing, like, again, it all goes back. Every conversation always goes back to story. But like, is the story good? Is it a good, strong story that then can live, or what can we do with the story to make it, you know, viable on stage? And
I think you know, I've been in a couple of big commercial Broadway extravaganzas, Little Mermaid and Addams Family, and those adaptations were did not do well critically. Did very well commercially, even though I know that Tom Schumacher would say that Little Mermaid concluded far sooner than anybody would have wanted. But I think with both of those ventures, those creative teams at the beginning, even though they had very recognizable commodities, and like what you were saying, they knew that, you know, there was going to be a built-in audience there, that I know that they, when they were creating at the table, had the dream of transcendence, but it doesn't always work.
Right.
It doesn't always work.
Right.
And then you are left with a lot of investors and a lot of people who need a product, and you do the best you can.
Yeah.
But you know, we were lucky. Both of those shows made very good money and are having lives beyond Broadway, which is fantastic. But we're not critically well received in this town.
Yeah. It's so interesting what goes into making musicals happen, and again, no formula. No, if everyone knew what the formula was, they would do it. Every show would be a hit.
every show would be a hit. Yeah.
Right?
I didn't make that.
Bring out the nuns. Well, I really want to thank each of you for your contributions here today. I love talking about musicals with you. And thank you for joining us. These programs are brought to you in partnership with our friends at CUNY TV. On behalf of the American Theater Wing, I'm Julie James, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Working in the Theater.
There is so much more to the American Theater Wing than just the Tony Awards.
The American Theater Wing's website has a wealth of information.
There's about 700 hours of material on the website.
700 hours? That's a lot of material.
Here's the jam, everybody.
It's free. There are videos, there are podcasts that you can download right onto your iPod.
You see artists talking about what inspires them and why they got into the business.
It's great to be able to hear people like Stephen Sondheim, Patti LuPone,
Doug Wright, Scott Ellis, Donna McKechnie.
Programs like Springboard NYC and the Theater Intern Group are great opportunities for young people who are trying to get into the business.
The Jonathan Larson grants for new composers are great.
And it's just another example of how the Wing is doing wonderful work in fostering the talents of young writers and artists.
What the American Theater Wing does with these programs is it immerses you with artists currently working the business.
What the Wing provides is inspiration.
I'm Jen Damiano.
I'm Hunter Bell.
I'm Bobby Steggert.
I'm Sekan Sembla.
If you love theater, go to AmericanTheaterWing.org.
It's all there on AmericanTheaterWing.org.
Click over and check it out. You might learn something.